Good morning. The nature of the work that we do in these morning groups is just a bit different than that of the regular evening closed classes. And to understand that, it is necessary to go back and explain how these morning groups began. It was in Seattle, and the Infinite Way work had been going on for several years then, when a new development became evident. People, students, were coming from other cities to where we were. Up to that time, a few had come from the East, the Middle West, the Southwest to California for a class, but it was the exception rather than the rule. The numbers were very, very few. But all of a sudden, in the Seattle work, we found that students were coming up there from California, they were coming on from New York and Michigan, many parts of the country, and always these were very serious students. That was why they were willing to travel long distances and spend hundreds upon hundreds of dollars. In some cases it amounted to thousands of dollars to come for that work. And you know that when people will spend that amount of money, they are evidently putting their time and attention and thought into what they're doing. In other words, they were putting into their search for God or truth everything that they had in the way of time, effort, money, even sacrificing business, taking additional time away from business and families. And so, on one trip, we found that there were about 20 students in Seattle who had come long distances. And some of them came to me and said, well, we only have a class in the evening. We have nothing to do all day. Isn't there some way we could be busy in the daytime too? And so we began a morning group made up principally of those from out of town. But of course, as Mrs. Holmes was the minister and leader of the center, and also was devoting time and effort and energy and goodwill into promoting the message of the Infinite Way, it was only natural that she was invited to attend those sessions. But then some of her good friends at the center noticed that she was missing from the center and had to find out why, and the first thing you know, some of her good friends had to be included in the morning work. And so this thing began. As I remember it, the first morning there were about 12 people there, and when we finished the end of the week, there were 25 sitting in chairs, and I don't know how many sitting on the floor, and of course the bed was completely covered. And each trip to Seattle, that developed further. As a matter of fact, we had not only this morning session, but an afternoon session and then the evening session. And this morning session, which began with, 10 o'clock to 11, all of a sudden became 9 o'clock to 11, and then 8:30 to 11:15, and so on, until we were just able to get a cup of coffee and get onto the platform at the center. So that Seattle has become sort of a symbol for around-the-clock groups. Mrs. Holmes also inaugurated the after 10 o'clock p.m. group at the hotel for coffee and coffee cake. So it is really around-the-clock group in Seattle. But anyhow, out of that began this work, because as there were students giving more and more of themselves to the work, to the study and practice in Seattle, they came to the group, and I understand that this next group in Seattle will take an entire room to fill, large room. Now, from there to Portland was just another step, and then on to New York. Something like that happened in New York, starting with a small group and ending with sitting on the floor. Now, you can see that we who find ourselves together in the morning group are quite different than students who are just coming to a place where they can give an hour or two a day to the study and practice. In that these morning groups always are found made up of very diligent students, and not only students, but people who are living the message. And so out of the depth of that consciousness comes a little different work than you will find ordinarily in the evening work. Now, a great benefit has come out of that to all of us. I mean by all of us, all who are students throughout the world, in that the subjects and things that come to light in these groups become the subjects of evening work. They spread out from here to the evening work and form the basis for a much higher type of closed class work than would ordinarily be the case. In other words, you may not find all of the subjects taken up in just the same way in the evening class, but you will always see that something that has come to light here has been repeated again in a different form, perhaps, in this evening work. And so these morning groups really form the center, and through this, consciousness unfolds to us these principles that later are embodied in the general teaching itself. And so these morning groups serve another purpose, in that they lift you and they lift me into a far higher state of consciousness than would ordinarily be the truth. It is impossible for people who are so earnestly on the path that they'll travel the globe over to find a new statement of truth or a new book of truth or a new teaching of truth. It is impossible for such a group to come together without the Father revealing greater depths than the Father can reveal in just that thought that is paying attention for an hour or two throughout the day. I have said in classwork before that the infinite way is not a teaching that lends itself to people who want to give it their spare time or imbibe it with their spare change. It isn't that kind of a thing at all. The infinite way is something that is a way of life, and it demands our life. Certainly in the initial stages, it is merely a teaching that people can adopt and in popular language, use. There are principles they can use, and out of it make for themselves a little better health or a little better supply, a little better happiness. But that isn't the function of the infinite way, and the students who attain any depth of it quickly come to see that they soon graduate from being students of the infinite way to where the infinite way takes them over and uses them as an instrument. Now, we have people studying the infinite way, practicing the infinite way, living the infinite way, who are writers, and it's an impossibility for them to be writers and students and not be influenced by the principles that are shown forth in the infinite way, and so they are used by the principle to set more and more of this out into the world through their writings. You'd be surprised now that there are 5 physicians actually practicing and studying the infinite way and utilizing it to the best of their present ability in their work. One man writes me from Chicago, a doctor, and I guess he meant it for a letter of testimony, to tell me what wonderful things the infinite way is doing in his hospital, where he has received permission to take our tapes and transfer them to wire recorders. And he has wire recordings of our tapes in the sick rooms, playing for the patients there as many hours a day as they can listen to it. And he writes me of the wonderful things that are taking place through that in his hospital work. In Seattle, some of Mrs. Holmes' students also are engaged in hospital work. One is a physician, another one is the, I guess, head secretary of the hospital, and nurse, and they too, to the best of their ability, are utilizing what they can understand of it in their work. And so you see, it eventually becomes not something that we merely think of in connection with some incidental healings or improving of our humanhood, but actually to where the principle takes over and becomes a mode of life. Now, this is the vision that I see. I have said that within 200 to 300 years, but I believe it'll be about 300 years, when this world will live entirely by spiritual consciousness, not by bread alone, but by spiritual consciousness, not merely students of the infinite way. No. Not merely people who adopt Christian Science as a religion or unity. I don't mean that. I don't mean anything in the way of adopting something. I mean that consciousness will be transformed. In other words, there will be so much truth loosed into human consciousness that human consciousness will be dispelled and it won't be there anymore. It will be like somebody trying to come into this room and start a fight among us. Well, it can't be done. There's no ground for it to be done, because I don't want anything you've got, you don't want anything I've got, and you don't want anything that each other's got. You are all individuals. You are all one with God. You know the source that you can turn to for anything you want. How could anybody possibly stir a fight in this room? Now, when all human consciousness is so imbued with the truth of its relationship to God, you will not be able to start a fight or a war or a lawsuit anywhere on earth. There's only one reason for lawsuits. Somebody wants something that somebody else has got, or somebody wants something they think belongs to them and somebody else is withholding it, All of this, you see, is based on a personal sense of possession of something out here. But supposing you don't care what happens to something out here. Supposing you have come to a place in consciousness where you say, all that the Father hath is mine, and I don't really mean say it. I mean know it, are convinced that all that the Father hath is mine, why will you allow yourself to fight for that which is out here in the center? I have said that materialism, which really is a form of communism, is the dividing up of the things that already exist. Now, I don't care whether you call that communism or whether you call it capitalism. It is still going out for the dollar that's out here, or the property that's out here, or the things that are out here. Whereas spiritual consciousness is the multiplying of loaves and fishes. It is not dividing, it is multiplying. And it doesn't multiply it from out here, it multiplies it from back here. Now then, assume just for a moment that aside from the truth that we're sharing with each other at this moment, which certainly doesn't belong to me, and doesn't come from me, it comes through me, except for the fact that we have come here for that unfoldment of truth, is there anything that anyone in this room has that anyone else wants or needs? No, it's an utter impossibility. Each one here is here only because they've demonstrated their way here. And they've only demonstrated their way here because they have attained a measure of that consciousness, that mind, which was also in Christ Jesus, which means the mind that knows all that the Father hath is mine. And we know enough to know that we can always go back to the center of our being. Supposing a bomb did come and wipe all the city out, and we were left intact here, but we couldn't go out there for anything. The stores are all wrecked, and the farms are all wrecked, and then what do we say? The place whereon I stand is holy ground. All that the Father hath is mine, because I and the Father are one. And since the kingdom of God is within me, my next meal must unfold from within me, not from Young's Bakery, from within me. What means the Father will use to bring it to us is not our business. It may well be that a store will be found intact, or a farm will be found intact, or manna will fall from the sky. But that is not our concern. Our concern is what state of consciousness do we find ourselves in when we are in a point of outer blankness. And the point we find ourselves in is my universal oneness with God, my conscious union with God, through which I understand that my good is flowing to me from within me. One time a student wrote and said, if I say that the Father is greater than I, isn't that duality? Isn't that a sense of two-ness? Well, it would be if you thought your Father was up here and you were down here. But it will not be a sense of duality or separation if you understand that the Father is within you and you are the without of the within. Then it is all one. Now, if I say that this truth that I'm voicing is within me, my vocal cords are the instrument through which they are, this truth is flowing. You can't say that I or the truth or my vocal cords are two. They are definitely one, but the truth is greater than my vocal cords. Is that clear? There can't be a truth in me and vocal cords separate and apart. Now, that would be like having a phonograph record here and the recorder over there. That would be two. But the truth is within me, and the vocal cords are within me, and they are one. But the truth is greater than the vocal cords, because the vocal cords could be destroyed, but the truth would grow a new set. Do you see that? Now, it is true about any organ or function of the body. I and the Father are one, and the Father within me, the invisible part of me, is the creative principle. The visible part of me is that which is the created part, and if you were to destroy this temple, the invisible part of me would quickly raise up another visibility. Now, that must be your understanding and mine as we walk this earth today, that right here is the Father and I. And wherever I am, God is. Wherever God is, I am one, inseparable, indivisible. Now, whatever is visible of me, that is merely the visible evidence of an invisible power, just as the words you are hearing is the visible or audible evidence of my invisible consciousness of truth. You, in your ears, are receiving the audible evidence of my state of consciousness. If my state of consciousness were lower, you would be having a visible or audible statement of truth lower. But as my consciousness of truth expands, you receive audibly, or in a book visibly, that state of consciousness externalized. But do you see how one they are? And do you see how I can never rise higher in demonstration than my state of consciousness? Just by this example. You can tell my state of consciousness by the truth you're hearing. Well, in other ways, you can look at my whole life and see the state of consciousness that is externalizing itself. How, then, do we improve ourselves from where we are, since improvement and expansion is necessary? With the understanding that this consciousness, which I am, is really God. As it comes forward, it is only that degree of my understanding of Godhood. But as it is in the invisible, it is God. So with you. As you declare God to be your individual consciousness, right where you are, in that degree do you give an ever-expanding sense of demonstration, opportunity to come through you. If you persist in saying, no, I haven't studied long enough, or I haven't practiced long enough, or I haven't been serious long enough, you do the limiting, because you're limiting it to you. Well, there again is a mistake that is made in the whole metaphysical world that we must never make. In the metaphysical world, it is said that you express God. Never believe that. Because if you do, you limit your demonstration to what you can express. When you understand that God expresses itself as your demonstration, now you're letting your demonstration become infinite. See the difference? Don't say, I express God, because then you limit yourself to your ability to express. But if you say, God expresses itself in me or through me, you no longer have a limit. You see that? It is like a phonograph record, and in one of them, it's going to let Bing Crosby express himself in song, and the next one is going to let Caruso. Each record is limited. The one is limited to Crosby, and the other is limited to Caruso. They're both limited. One is a better limitation, a bigger one, but it's still limitation. Now, let's have a blank record and say, no, let God express itself as, and then see what the record can give forth. Because, you see, the record can give forth anything that is played through it. So can we. So can we. We can give forth any demonstration that is played through us, and if we understand God to be the only actor, the only doer, the only beer, the only expressor, then our outer demonstration can be infinite. But if you say, I express God, you'll express a very tiny little bit of him, because you'll only express him according to your ability. But if you say, no, I don't do any expressing, God expresses itself, and I am the visibility of God expressing itself, you make for a greater demonstration. And the more you realize God to be individual consciousness, the more you take from yourself the responsibility and the limitation of your life. Do you see that? The more you acknowledge, well, Paul, I live yet not I, Christ liveth my life. The more you acknowledge God is living your life, the less responsibility you'll have, the less limitation you'll have, the freer flow there will be of God life. What life flows through a coconut tree? Coconut life or God life? Well, it must be God life, because right next to it is a papaya tree, and it's the same life flowing through it. And right next to it is a mango tree, and right next to it is a... And so it's God life expressing itself, and that God life that is expressing itself may appear outwardly as a mango, may appear outwardly as a papaya, may appear outwardly as a pineapple, but it is all God life. Now, the moment you would try to limit it and say, no, this is only this and this, that is where you break down and limit your product. Many a person working metaphysically has increased the product on their trees and in their herds of cattle through knowing that it was God expressing itself, not cows and pigs and plants. God expressing itself. Now, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. But ye shall know the truth. That is where your part and my part comes into this demonstration. It isn't a matter that this is truth. It isn't a matter that there's a God. None of that is of any benefit to you or to me. The only benefit to us is in ye knowing the truth. The truth will make you free if ye know it. The truth will make you free because it's truth. Because this truth that we're declaring and living, this truth which has already blessed us so abundantly, remember that truth is available to all this world. It's outside destroying itself. And it is doing nothing for that world except leading it on to destruction. And that is because the individuals are not knowing the truth. Now, as you know this truth, and again, let me take this up for a minute. When I say know the truth, I am not saying it to you in any of the sense that many have been accustomed to in metaphysical work, that is, in the sense of going around affirming that it is the truth or declaring that it is the truth. When I say, ye shall know the truth, I mean it in the same light as I would say, if you want to drive an automobile, you've got to learn the principles of automobile driving. Now, I don't mean go around affirming what to do with your left foot and your right hand. I mean actually knowing what the principles of driving an automobile are, getting it into your consciousness so that it becomes so automatic that when you sit down to drive, you don't even consciously touch the foot pedal or the hand pedal. That's all being done by the body without your thinking about it, taking no thought. So with knowing the truth. When I say, ye shall know the truth, we'll just start with this one truth, that God is my consciousness. I mean this. Almost every hour in the day we are faced with a sense of limitation in one way or another. Maybe a limited sense of health, limited sense of supply, limited sense of activity, limited sense of inspiration. Every time we are faced with that appearance or temptation, we must answer it within ourselves. But God is my consciousness. Then the inspiration or the health or the supply is flowing from God. That is knowing the truth. Then you drop it. It may be that this afternoon that same problem will plague you or another, and you will have to go back again and remember, wait a minute. It's God that is my consciousness. There's no limitation. Or it may be that it isn't the same problem. It may be that this afternoon you are given something to do that is far too difficult for you to do, or that you haven't enough money to do with. Then you say, well, now what about that? And the answer comes, he performeth that which is given me to do. He perfecteth that. Then it isn't my responsibility to do it. It isn't even my responsibility to finance it. Okay, Father, take over. That is specifically knowing the truth. It is the same way that you may be faced with someone in your experience. Makes no difference whether it's family or patient or student that is showing evidences of limited mentality. You don't try to heal them, but ye shall know the truth. And so you go back and, God is individual mind. God is the only mind. That's all right. That's God's responsibility then. Then it isn't you that has to be intelligent. It's God that has to be intelligent. And that takes all the burden away from you or your patient or your student. You see, in metaphysics, one of the things that has tangled the student into meshes that they can't get out of is the word you, he, and she. The words you, he, and she. You must be more loving. You must be more generous. He needs more of this. Or, if only she had more understanding. Well, that's all nonsense. Don't ever practice that way. Don't ever be concerned with what I, me, he, she, or it is doing. It would be terrible to have to say, my dog should be more intelligent. Or if my cat could only understand this simple little truth. Well, I have said in one of the writings, treat your patient, your human patient, with as much respect as you would your cat and dog. Don't expect any more of them, the humans, than you do of your cat and dog. Expect it of God. Then you will find the right mode of practice. Now, how would you treat a sick cat or a sick dog? Would you start to voice truth to them? Would you ask them to start tithing with the church or with you? Would you ask them to just understand this one little truth about God? Would you ask them if they had faith in God? Of course you wouldn't. You know you wouldn't. you would not expect anything of the cat or dog or bird or plant. You would expect something within yourself. And that's placing the responsibility where it really belongs. Now that cat, dog, bird, plant is within your consciousness, and so you are responsible for it. And my patients and my students are in my consciousness, and I am responsible for them. Now, to what extent? I'm responsible to the extent that I must expect nothing of my patients. I must expect no cooperation. I must expect no gratitude. I must expect nothing. The mere fact that they have reached out for help, they have fulfilled Scripture. They have a grain of faith, enough to ask for help. And more especially, if they pay anything for it, they've got a lot of faith. Nobody pays anything for what they haven't got faith. So their function really and truly is performed when they've asked for help, especially if they've asked with any degree of faith. The rest of the responsibility is up to the practitioner. Now, what is the practitioner's responsibility? You shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. So the practitioner's responsibility is to know the truth. What is the truth? Now, this is the truth about cat, dog, bird, plant, patient, student. The truth is that God is individual life, individual soul, individual consciousness. God is the only law in this universe. God is the only substance and the only activity. God is the only cause and the only effect. God is not only universal spiritual being, God is individual being. God is being you and God is being me. God is being a mango and a pineapple and a potato. God is the life and soul and law unto all being. Yes, but I'm a practitioner and I am faced here with an evidence to the contrary. That's right, you are. You are being faced with an evidence to the contrary. What are you going to do with that? Well, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. What truth? What truth? How many gods are there? It's always safe to go back to the first commandment. How many gods are there? One. One God? One creative principle? Yes. Well, then what have I got to do with appearances or temptations? If there is only one creative principle, how can there be a good creation and a bad creation? If I only have one God, which means one power, how can there be a power of health and a power of disease? If I have only one God, how can I have a power of abundance and a power of lack and limitation? Oh, ye shall know the truth. And the truth is that there is only one God, one power, one law. You see yesterday, the armor of oneness. That's what we put on. Matter of fact, we don't only put it on, we keep it on. We sleep in it. The armor of oneness. I am all. Beside me there is no other. Only God is. And because God is and God is infinite, God's infinity alone is. That is knowing the truth. Now that takes care of the appearance of evil, the temptation of discord, the temptation to accept a selfhood apart from God. Since there is only one creative principle, there can only be one type of creation, and that is spiritual. Therefore, even in the standpoint of effect, this body is the temple of the living God. Whatever appears contrary to that in this body represents the degree of my acceptance of a selfhood apart from God, an activity or a law or a power apart from God. Now, to the extent of my realization, I can manifest this as the temple of the living God, but not one step more. And that is why we all must be patient with ourselves. We are being transformed, but it is a gradual process. Not that God requires time or space in which to perform it, but there must be a yielding of the material sense, which has been our unfortunate birthright since the days of Adam. In other words, that which is bothering all of us in this world is the sense of a selfhood apart from God. And that sense of selfhood began symbolically with the experience of Adam or the prodigal son. Now, since we're not responsible for the world and it's not responsible for us, we are responsible for our own state of consciousness. We are responsible for what we accept in consciousness, and that is what constitutes ye shall know the truth. What you accept in consciousness becomes the law unto your experience. If you sow to the flesh, you will reap corruption. If you sow to the Spirit, you will reap life everlasting. Now, I want to show you how much this is a matter of you, of what you sow and you reap, what you sow, what you reap, what you know and what you demonstrate. In our work here this past 3 months, several times we had work come up that brought into it the subject of casting bread upon the waters. And the idea was voiced that you can only bring back to yourself the bread that you have cast upon the waters, that you have no right to draw in from the water of life the bread that belongs to your neighbor. As a matter of fact, in the long run, you can't do it. That is what has wrecked the lives of people, trying to take what was someone else's and then finding out in the end that there's a law of retribution that pulls it back and wrecks the one who's holding on to the other end of it. Now, cast your bread upon the waters, and then your bread will come back well buttered. But it must be the bread that you cast upon the waters. Life is individual, all right? The word bread in Scripture means, like meat, it means the substance of life or the staff of life. And so, the bread that you cast on the waters is the bread of life, the meat of life, the staff of life, the substance of life. And that is what sustains you and maintains you, what you cast upon the waters. Now there are 3 ways of casting bread upon the waters. The most important one of all is in knowing the truth. The truth that you know is the experience that comes back to you. In other words, if I sit here knowing God as your life and mind, you understand every word that I voice. If I declare knowingly, God is your life and your mind, then you are able to understand, to grasp that which I am saying. If, to use Alan Boone's term, if I were looking down my nose at you and saying, I am a teacher and you are a student, I would set up a wall in here and you would never grasp the truth that is going out. I had this proven to me in my first readership experience in the prison in New York, where at first I thought that I was a practitioner and they were prisoners. And the best I could do was have 8 to 11 men sitting out there interested in what I was saying. But the minute I realized the error of that and began to realize why God is their being, and I had a quotation then from Science and Health, man has no qualities underived from deity. The moment I began to see that their intelligence had been derived from deity, their intelligence was of God, inside of 6 weeks we had an attendance of 77 men. Now, I saw that later in my experience as church reader, when, having learned the lesson by then, I went right into the desk without any looking down the nose of the congregation, understanding that the mind that was speaking through me was hearing through them. And the result was that we had standing room only for 3 years of readership. Do you see that? Because the one mind was drawing to itself its own. And I've recently had that same experience in the prison here, where I went to speak to 18 men and found 66 waiting. Now, the whole thing lies in not looking down your nose. That is, not looking from a standpoint of superiority down into inferiority. You will see that very clearly outlined in Alan Boone's new book, Kinship with All Life. He is very, very clear on the point that whether you're dealing with animals or with humans, the moment you're looking down on them, you're going to draw back to yourself that very same thing. Now, so we learn in this work. The first bread that you want to cast on the waters, and when I say you, I mean me. The first bread that we have to cast on the waters is specifically knowing that God is the life and mind and soul of everybody in this world, and it doesn't make any difference whether they're our friend or our enemy. It doesn't make any difference whether they're Americans or Russians. It doesn't make any difference whether they are our people or other people. Our casting of the bread upon the waters consists of knowing the truth about God as the soul of this universe, as the life, the mind, the spirit of this universe. If you did nothing more for the rest of your life but live in that consciousness that God is individual being, that alone would make your demonstration of harmony. You would never need another truth than that. Just God is the life, soul, law, the only power, the only activity. That would make anybody's demonstration, just living in that one truth. Well, we can, though, go further, and we can take the first commandment and understand that nothing and nobody out here has power, since only God has power, and the kingdom of God is within me. Therefore, this power flows out from me. It's never directed at me. There is no evil power directed at me. All power flows out from me, and it is good. That's also knowing the truth, casting bread upon the water, because you're not only doing it for yourself, you're taking the power out of the atomic bombs. You're taking the power out of the mind that would throw an atomic bomb. You are depriving so-called moral mind of an opportunity to express every time you cast that water, or that bread, upon the water. that understanding that God is the only power, not mortal mind, not hate, envy, jealousy, malice. That isn't power. God is power. Now, you go a step further and take the Master's second commandment, love thy neighbor as thyself. And you cast that bread upon the water through love. How do we love our neighbor as ourselves? By knowing this truth about our neighbor, whether our neighbor is a friendly one or a hateful one. Now, as we fulfill the first commandment and the second commandment, we are casting bread, spiritual bread, upon the water, and spiritual bread, which means infinite bread, good bread, eternal and immortal bread, will come back to us. By far, the most important bread that we can cast upon the water is this spiritual bread of knowing the truth. But there is another form of it, and that is the one given to us in Matthew 25, that service to our fellow man. When I was in prison, he visited me, and when I was sick, he comforted me, and when I was hungered, he fed me, and so forth and so on. And then they say, but Master, when saw we thee and hungered and fed thee, and when saw we thee in prison? And his answer is, inasmuch as you have done it unto the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. So that every service that we perform for a fellow man is another form of casting our bread upon the waters. But now you see that all of this means individual responsibility. You cannot collectively demonstrate this, only individually. You can't demonstrate your safety, security, and harmony by being a member of this group. You can only demonstrate your safety and security and harmony by your knowing of the truth. And that is why that in this work we cannot say united we stand, unless we say united with God, with truth we stand. Being united with each other will not help us. Yes, there is a help from being united with each other as we are in groups like this, but that of course is dependent upon what you're doing inside of you while you're physically united. You can be physically united here, but spiritually as separate and apart as the poles. And then being here will do you no good. If you are here in this same mind, in this same spirit, if you are here with your defenses down, in other words, in the saying, I'm not here with desire, ambition, I'm not here to get, I'm here only to bask in the sunshine of truth. If my only purpose in being here is love, life, sharing, casting bread upon the water, then where two or more are gathered in this nature, there is even a greater degree of the Christ power made evident, made manifest. Do you see that? But just because you're physically here will not make you benefit. We had an experience in Seattle. I'm glad so many of us are here who were in that group in Seattle when it happened, that right in the midst of a program, of a talk, it was as if the lights dimmed, the whole atmosphere of the room changed, and I had to stop talking. And then all of a sudden it started again, and we had had an absolute visitation of the Christ in that room. Great big room with 350 or more people seated there, but it was so evident that I doubt that there was, well, I know that everyone here knew it and felt it that was in that group, but many, many more. Well, what happened? One woman, after we got to the back of the auditorium, came out running, holding her dress. She had had a tumor as big as a 9-month baby. And in that second, it disappeared out of her body, and she came out running with her dress like that to show it was gone. There was no specific treatment. No one knew that she was there or that it was there. Before that night was over, 12 people came and told of wonderful healings that took place in that instant. Now, what happened to 200 people there that didn't even know that we had had a Christ visitation? Oh, there were lots of people in that room that never felt it, never saw it, never realized it. What was wrong with them? They were only physically present. They weren't there in spirit, in truth, they weren't there in one mind. Probably they were there too eager to get something. And you see, God isn't anything like that you can get anything from. God isn't in the giving business. God is in the ising business. God is, but God is available to all like sunlight is. And so when an individual gets so busy thinking, I'm going to that meeting and maybe I'll get a healing, or maybe I'll get supply, or maybe some miracle will happen, they're shutting themselves off from the source of good. If they go there with the feeling, I'm going to get an awareness of God, the feel of God, I'm going to bask in the consciousness of God, or maybe God will use my consciousness to bless somebody else. Those are the ones who see, hear, taste, touch, and feel these spiritual things and then go away illumined. Many people come after the meetings and say, I walked away as if I were on a cloud. And others say, I just didn't hear anything. I don't know. I just can't understand it. Nothing happened. Well, I bring all this out for one reason. There are too many people who believe that because they belong to a certain church group or a certain sect or creed or even spiritual healing religion, that is going to make their demonstration for them. And rest assured, that in and of itself will not do it. This is an activity of individual you and me. And we do it through ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Now, what is this turmoil in the world today except a vision that the masses have that there is an ideology that will save them the responsibility of not only working too hard for their livelihood, but will guarantee them in some miraculous way that they'll have social security or financial security or some kind of security throughout all their days at somebody else's expense. In other words, the battle that is going on in this world today is merely a battle to get out of personal or individual responsibility for living. That's all it is. That's all there ever was to Marxism or to communism, was a hope that you won't have to do anything about your life. Society will do it. That wonderful word, society, or the government will do it, and you will just have baseball games and radios and televisions and an income and so forth and so on. Now, you would be surprised to know that there are more than 50% of the people in this modern American nation who would sell their birthright for that very security, who are willing to give up all individual endeavor, all individual opportunity to make their own demonstration in life, just to be sure that there's a Papa Union up there to see that they get enough wages, and a white father at Washington to see that there's enough laid by when they're too old, and so forth and so forth. That is the battle that is taking place in human consciousness today between the forces that are eager for a world of individual freedom, the individual freedom to be a Christian or an atheist, the individual freedom to succeed or fail on one's own ability, the ability to be about our own lives without continuous supervision around the clock. Now, it isn't an easy battle, and be assured it is not going to be won by atomic bombs or hydrogen bombs. That's just nonsense for anybody to believe that you can destroy a state of consciousness with a bullet or with poison. You can't do it. That is like these last 7,000 years of wars. Each war, they believe, will end war, and they make each war more destructive so as to bring about the end. But no one takes into consideration basic human nature. Every time a champion prize fighter is defeated, he lives only for one purpose, and that is a comeback. Or a golf champion, or a tennis champion, or a swimming champion. Let them be defeated, and you'll see that the rest of their lives are going to be devoted to getting back again. So it is with every nation who has ever been defeated in war. They live only for one thing: to come back, to retaliate, to get back what they had before. And that is basic in human nature, and you won't wipe that out with bullets or with war, victories of war. They will be wiped out by a transition in consciousness that takes place when we as individuals begin to understand that there is a principle operating in our consciousness, a principle of individual freedom, of individual health, harmony, wholeness. And what brings it about is, ye shall know the truth, or ye shall cast upon the waters. Then it comes back. No one else can give you security. No one can give you bomb shelter security. No one can give you any security. The security is produced by your loosing on the waters the bread of life.